Hey, good morning, everyone. We are heading for Oklahoma this morning. Don't forget, we've got our ongoing Route 66 contest. We'll get to that in a few minutes. We've got a really interesting program. We started this week of roadside attractions with cemeteries, and we continue our curiosity week or attractions of note, whichever you prefer, with another interesting cemetery, but this one has quite a backstory, both sides. We're going to Fort Reno along Route 66, just west of El Reno, Oklahoma. Fort Reno was named for Major General Jesse L. Reno. He was a casualty of the Battle of Antietam during the American Civil War. The military outpost was initially commissioned in 1874. And just a hint of its long history. During World War II, it was a POW camp and a transit base for U.S. troops traveling to points for either the European or Pacific theater of operations. And in 1947, it was still being used, this time by the Department of Agriculture as a research laboratory. Long and colorful history. Interesting museums. Is a place I highly recommend visiting. Like I say, it began as a military camp in 1874 during the era of the Indian Wars. And it was designed to pacify the Cheyenne and Arapaho. Agent John Miles of the Darlington Indian Agency had petitioned for the post. And stationed there were troops from the 10th Cavalry, better known as the Buffalo Soldiers, African American soldiers, which that alone gives the fort a very fascinating history. The military camp near the Cheyenne Agency for Darlington was set up for 19 months initially, and soldiers from the 5th and 6th Cavalry from Fort Dodge and Leavenworth were stationed there. And then in 1875, the commanding officer was authorized to select a site on the south side of the North Canadian River, and he built corrals and a wagon yard, dig wells, set up a sawmill for a new military post. And it was named for, like, say, Fort Reno in February 1876 by General Phil Sheridan, who made quite a name for himself in the Civil War. The cavalry and infantry stationed at Fort Reno played an important role in the transition of the area from Indian Territory to Oklahoma statehood in 1907. United States cavalry units, including the Buffalo Soldiers of the 9th and 10th U.S. Cavalry and the 24th and 25th Infantry, and a Cheyenne and Arapaho Indian Scouts, along with the U.S. Marshal Service, well, they were the law and order in that wild and unruly territory before statehood. The cavalry and Cheyenne police later operated jokingly what they referred to as the beef issue. And, well, a lot of other things they were involved with during this period. I mentioned General Phil Sheridan. He was across the Cimarron River in Indian Territory in 1885. And President Cleveland at that time had ordered reinforcements to Fort Reno to meet with Agent Dyer and the Cheyenne leader Stonecalf. General Sheridan concluded that Agent Dyer was not aggressive enough in his efforts to disarm and put Indians onto the farms near Darlington. Pretty tough history, dark history, but he recommended to President Cleveland that all leases be terminated in Indian Territory and that unauthorized persons be removed from Indian land. Military personnel replace civilians at both the Cheyenne and Arapaho Agency. And Sheridan spent time, he was at Fort Reno as his headquarters during these early years. And a log cabin structure known as Sheridan's headquarters, or billet, was relocated to the Canadian County Historical Museum grounds in El Reno. The cemetery I mentioned, there is so many fascinating headstones and people there. One of the fellows that's interred is Ben Clark. He was a cavalry scout. He traveled and was displaced to lead groups throughout the Great Plains to several forts. In the Civil War, he was with the 6th Kansas Cavalry. In 1868, he was assigned to Lieutenant Colonel George Custer's 7th Cavalry in present northwest Oklahoma. He led the 7th Cavalry south to the Washita River and the very heinous attack on the winter camp of Cheyenne Peace Chief Black Kettle in the very, very controversial Battle of the Washita. He came to Fort Reno in January of 1878 as an interpreter to the Cheyenne. He had actually married into the Cheyenne tribe. He, his third wife, and 5 of their 11 children are interred in the cemetery. Fort Reno was initially established to quell, like I say, the unrest among the Indians in the region during the 1870s. The Battle of Sand Hill, April of 1875, took place just 2 miles north of the fort. And another dramatic incident. There's some great books I want to recommend about this. In Dull Knife's Wake, published by Maddox and Maddox, and Perilous Pursuit by Stan Hogg. They're available at the Fort Reno Visitor Center, by the way. And the book and movie Cheyenne Autumn, that was eventually filmed in Monument Valley, Utah back in the early 60s, was about taken from these books. And of course, ironically, Monument Valley is quite opposite from the landscapes that you'll find around Fort Reno. The Buffalo Soldiers, very interesting chapter in history, is all preserved there at the museum. The Fort Reno also played an important part in the Oklahoma Land Run. That's all told there. One of the interesting chapters, I should say one of the many interesting chapters of the show associated with the fort, is its role as a remount station. You know, a lot of people don't realize that horses and mules were used even in World War II. In 1908, Fort Reno became one of 3 Army quartermaster remount stations for the military. It continued in that role through 1948. Specialized horse breeding and training of pack mules was the central focus of activity at Fort Reno during these years. The horses and mules were later transported by rail from Fort Reno and shipped to other parts of the world during World War I and World War II. Social activities at Reno included polo matches, horse races, horse shows, auctions. Will Rogers attended a lot of the events there. The principal remount units were the 252nd, 253rd Quartermaster Remount Squadrons, and they called them the Fort Reno Remount Cowboys. These were real cowboys recruited from out through the plains who broke and trained horses and mules. It wasn't until 1948 that the Quartermaster Remount Depot at Fort Reno was decommissioned. But animals were still shipped out of Fort Reno until 1952. And then the fort was the site of the Department of Agriculture's Grazing Lands Research Facility. Now, here's where we get into another interesting chapter, and this ties into why I mentioned the cemetery was so fascinating. During World War II, 94 acres of an eastern section of Fort Reno served as an internment work camp, or POW camp, for German and Italian soldiers, mostly from General Rommel's Africa Corps. These guys had been captured in North Africa. Approximately about 1,300 POWs were brought to Fort Reno by rail. And while in prison there, they were hired as laborers for local farms. And in 1944, they built the Post Chapel, still there, located to the north of the parade grounds. This, as far as I know, this is the only historic military cemetery that has U.S. military personnel as well as 70 German and Italian soldiers interred anywhere along Route 66. It's the only cemetery I know like this. Only one Fort Reno German POW died while imprisoned at the Fort Reno internment camp. The others had died at other POW camps and were brought there. Germans and Italians continue to make special trips to view the resting place of relatives of friends. And every November, there's a German American Heritage Memorial Day, a wreath-laying ceremony in remembrance of the men buried at the Fort Reno Cemetery. Extreme Justice, a really interesting novel by Vince Green about the death of Johannes Kuntz. This story is true. He is buried there at Fort Reno. He was beaten to death by fellow POWs who accused him of being a traitor. Those charged with his murder were sent to stand trial at Camp Gruber. They were found guilty, taken to Fort Leavenworth, where they were executed by hanging. All amazing stories, but there's more to this place than just military. Famous aviatrix Amelia Earhart test piloted a forerunner of the helicopter. They called it an auto gyro at the Fort Reno airstrip. Blackjack, the spirited riderless ceremonial horse used in the funeral processions of Presidents Hoover, Kennedy, and Johnson, General MacArthur was raised and trained at Fort Reno. Famous artist Frederick Remington, he spent 3 months at Fort Reno in 1888, producing many of his drawings of cavalry, Buffalo Soldiers, Cheyenne, Arapaho Scouts. The Fort Reno Visitor Center is just tremendous place to visit if you get a chance. Isn't that quite a interesting story? And that's another Route 66 location that's missed a lot, and definitely should be added to a Route 66 visit. Okay, hey, our contest. Today's clue is the letter O. What we're looking for is the name of the business and what Route 66 community it is located in. And the first person with a correct answer, they get a autographed copy of my latest book. Here we are on Route 66. We started giving clues on March 25th, so if you go back to our programs, you can find all of the clues. But I'll give them to you now. We've given out the letter N, the letter G, the letter E, the letter A, the letter I, the letter D, the letter O, and the letter R. Okay, simple enough. Since we were talking Route 66 and road trips, I'd like to give a shout out to today's program sponsor, Route Trip USA, specialist in bespoke Route 66 trips. If you're looking for a grand adventure in the United States or Canada, memorable holiday, trouble-free, give the folks at Route Trip USA a holler. Like us here at Jim Hinckley's America, they taste the enchiladas and they test the pillows, so you don't have to worry about it. Next week, we'll have kick this off again, Monday morning, 6:30 a.m. Mountain Standard Time. Wake Up with Jim. We'll start another series. We'll continue here with some road trip inspiration, if you will, just like with our theme song, music from Joe and Woody and the Boys of the Road Crew. For our extended program, all interactive, of course, feel free to call in anytime or chime in, put a note in. We'll try to respond. And Sunday morning, we're going to have a great program. I'm not going to give you too many teasers, but I guarantee you're not going to want to miss this. If you are a fan of road trips, this is a program for you. Hey, before we go, do we have any call-ins or questions this morning? Anything I can answer for you about Fort Reno in Oklahoma? Well, in that case, I suppose what we're going to do is bid everyone adios. And hopefully you can join us 7 o'clock Mountain Standard Time Sunday morning for special fun-filled, interactive Fast-paced half hour coffee with Jim. Invite your friends. Let's make it a coffee party. My friends, hey, thank you for joining us today. Feel free to share this program. It'll be archived later this morning, and share it with your friends.
Into mysteries unknown. Come along for the ride. Jim Hinckley's America. Jim Hinckley's America.